It is week 8 of the Matt Barrie Show, presented by Allstate. I am Matt Barrie. Hope everyone had a great college football Saturday. It was one of those slates we've been waiting for. We had so many ranked matchups, and on the heels of what happened on Friday night with Miami going down to Louisville, you kind of had an idea, right? You had an idea looking at all the games, looking at all the matchups, looking at the time of year that yesterday was going to be a wild, wild Saturday. It did not disappoint. But before we get into all of it with Paul Finebaum, we're going to do our good hands play of the day presented by Allstate of the Alabama-Tennessee game. Third Saturday in October, Joey Aguilar in Tennessee looking to get this game to 16-14 until Xavier Brown steps in front of this pass and takes it 99 yards for a pick six. It completely changed the course of this game for Alabama, Tennessee, a game that the Tide would go on to win 37-20. And now that you look at what Alabama's done over the last 4 weeks, I want you to listen to the schedule and how they've done it. They beat Georgia. They beat Vanderbilt. They went on the road and beat Missouri, and then they took care of Tennessee at home last night. Here's the stat you need to know with the Allstate Good Hands play. Alabama is the first SEC team to win 4 straight ranked games without having a bye week to do it. And all of that is to say is when we get now into the show with Alabama, you could argue, and I get it, Ohio State's completely dominant. They're the number one team in the country. But you could argue, based on resume of what they've done for the last month, that Alabama has an argument to be the top-ranked team in the country. As we welcome in Paul Finebaum, as we do each and every day on the Matt Barrie Show, presented by Allstate. Paul, natural starting point, third Saturday in October. We play to smoke cigars. In the end, Alabama was lighting them up, and they've been lighting them up since Florida State. What an impressive win for Kalen DeBoer and the Tide. And like I said, they could argue they could be the number one team in the country.
They could. I mean, right now I'd probably still side with Ohio State. But, Matt, having been down there Friday and Saturday, the vibe was off the charts. It's so different such a different feeling. I mean, it feels a little bit like the Saban era again, even though we know who is in charge. But Kalen DeBoer has just it's been a transformational project. And I think Alabama is in the conversation for the best team in the country. I think we can all go there. This has been a very difficult stretch, and really, as you think about it, the Vanderbilt win is getting better with the weeks as they go by. But they're just such a complete team, and when they just have a knack for making the big play at the right time, as we saw a minute ago.
Paul, you're tied to that program, and that you've covered it for years. And we questioned at the beginning of the year after the Florida State loss and really how it ended and some of the reports coming about what was going on within the facilities. We even questioned whether or not this DeBoer thing was going to work out. I mean, it was natural for people to start picking and choosing because of what Nick Saban was able to do there and dominate for 17 years. But something changed. Something clicked. Something has gone now in the way of Alabama to where we're looking around and we're saying, oh, Ryan Grubb is back with this guy, Kalen DeBoer. Ty Simpson has settled down and playing as good as football in the country. You'd be hard-pressed to find a receiver room better than theirs. I'm just curious, from someone who covers that program, what do you think clicked or changed or started working there?
I think you have to start with Ty Simpson, because he has been the glue that has kept his offense moving. And Matt, nobody wants to go back 7-8 weeks, but after they got off to a really good start against FSU, they were jarred. And every cliche you've heard too many times, and I'm not going to waste your time with them, but they just did not have the innate ability to recover, because it was Ty Simpson's first game. And they did transform after that. And DeBoer was able to take this, low-key charm where he is a genius in terms of the X's and O's, but he had not handled some of the other parts very well. And he slowly moved the knob on the volume, and he got a little bit tougher. He got a lot of buy-in. And I remember 2, 3, 4 weeks into the season, I kept hearing from my friends, and they're unbelievable. And I was telling you on Sunday, come on, they're not playing anybody. They're playing ULM and Wisconsin and a bunch of nobodies, but it didn't really matter. They came together cohesively, and I think you mentioned the name a minute ago. Ryan Grubb is the key because he has just he's comfort food to Kalen DeBoer. Kalen DeBoer you've seen the buddy shows in college football, and it just made him more comfortable and secure, and all of a sudden they started dialing it up.
Yeah, and look, I'm glad you brought up some of the schedule because I'm one of those that I don't like it when teams, really dominant programs, play these teams they know they're going to beat the hell out of. I don't think that does any good for anyone, including the team they beat the hell out of, because they go on to play the schedule and the Power Five and the top echelon teams of the Power Five beat them up in those games, and sometimes they're not healthy for their schedule. But what it did do for Alabama, you hit on it. When you have such a disappointing loss in the first week of the season, like Bama did to Florida State, you need that time to regroup and figure out who you are and what we're going to be. And Alabama and Kalen DeBoer used that. Now, I remember last year, I'll never forget this. There was that game against Georgia and Jalen Milroe, and they came out and dominated. Georgia storms back. Alabama gets the win. And I came here on the Matt Barrie Show presented by Allstate, and I said, Paul, there is closure with the Nick Saban era. He's done it. He's given people a reason to exhale. And then it kind of, I don't want to use the term fell apart, but it kind of went off the tracks a little bit. I'm not going to go so far as to say that they've moved on, but I will say that Kalen DeBoer has stabilized the tide relative to how we saw last year end and this year begin, because now with that schedule and what we would term as a pretty open SEC, I'm sitting here this morning on Sunday, October 19th, saying Alabama's the team to beat in the SEC.
Without a doubt. And I don't want to mitigate the name of Nick Saban because it's self-explanatory. But this was the first time I've been in Tuscaloosa during the football season this year. And I just didn't hear Nick Saban's name very often. I mean, everyone pays the proper amount of reverence and deference to him, but it was about Kalen DeBoer. It wasn't about Saban any longer, and I really think that is fascinating. And I saw DeBoer Saturday morning, very comfortable. He understands what the questions are, and I asked him on our show about something he had told me in July about retaining the roster. They didn't lose anybody, and he said the real residual of that was not so much having everybody back, but it's the dividends that started to pay off after the Florida State loss. It's like having money grow, and that experience finally came together. No, it didn't come together on day one, and that Florida State loss continues to look really bad, but it just doesn't matter anymore because Alabama has found its way back.
And you almost wonder, and again, this is, we talk ball here on the show. You almost wonder if the roster holdover, and a lot of those guys were from the Nick Saban era, Paul, you almost wonder if DeBoer had to establish that he is the leader and alpha of the program, if some of those players didn't kind of test it a little bit. And now we know that Kalen DeBoer, he is the guy that they respect. He is the alpha. He is the leader. He's the guy in charge. Because sometimes these kids, in lack of a better term, they'll test the adult. They always do. And now, before there was no testing Nick Saban, if you tested him, you were out of there, right? Now it's DeBoer's the guy. We know that. And once you test the leader and the leader responds in the way that they should, you're seeing it all come together in front of them.
Yeah. And it's what's really interesting is just moving around Tuscaloosa over the weekend, you'd run into somebody, Matt, and I'm going to leave all names and all positions out of it. And they were going back to weekend one and that Sunday, Monday after the Florida State loss. And there were real conversations going on about what have we gotten ourselves into? And because everybody, there wasn't much buy-in for Kalen DeBoer. Now it's entirely, it's as close to 100% buy-in as I have seen at any moment during this tenure. And I give him credit because I don't know many people that could have withstood the criticism that he took after that first weekend.
Yeah, and we'll get into that in a minute. I do want to say it is 8:53 a.m. here on the East Coast. We've done this show before and coaches have been dismissed. James Franklin a week ago. So if something happens with Mike Norvell between now and then, we wouldn't know about it because we're taping this first thing Sunday morning to get it out to you. So I parlayed that, and Florida State talk is what they did to Alabama. Now I have no idea how Alabama lost that game, neither here nor there. Get into Georgia, Ole Miss. What a game that was, 43-35, the final. Lane got up in that game, and you were thinking, I think it was 35-26, I believe is what the score was. And then Georgia goes on to outscore Ole Miss 17-0 in the fourth quarter. And Paul, a 17-0 difference in the score in the fourth quarter, that is a championship level fourth quarter by a team that knew what they had to do at home against an Ole Miss team that's really, really talented. And the biggest thing I learned yesterday about Georgia, and I think Georgia fans learned about Georgia, and they can almost exhale the rest of the year and that they have this question answered. There is no doubt to me whatsoever that Gunnar Stockton is the guy that can lead Georgia to an SEC championship, a college football playoff berth, and a run through the playoff based on what I saw yesterday.
Without a doubt. And for all the criticism that I and many others have landed on him and Mike Bobo, it was a pretty ingenious game plan as well. And Gunnar Stockton is able to execute it. So it's so hard to get these narratives right when you're stubborn, which we all are, especially me. But it was amazing to watch. And I mean, to think that Georgia is in a shootout, and it was just baffling to me because I mean, clearly Kirby Smart's well aware of what he doesn't have on defense, and therefore he was more aggressive. It was you can't just stumble out of the gate like he has in the last couple of weeks, or it will get you beat. And it wasn't perfect, but man, was that second half, especially the fourth quarter, amazing to watch.
Did you think? And again, it's based on body of work, so I don't think we were wrong in believing this. At least I don't think that I was. Did you think that Georgia was capable of getting in a shootout and winning? Because I just hadn't seen that part of their portfolio. I saw a team that got down 10-0, should have been 17-0 Auburn, kind of fight. They're kind of like a BOA-CONSTRICTOR. I say this about them every year. They'll kind of hold on and then start grabbing you as you start to get away, and they'll just squeeze the life out of you. I didn't know they had it in them to get in a 40-plus point shootout.
I mean, the Tennessee game gave you a little bit of an indicator, but not since then. But yeah, I mean, when you think about this Georgia team, they could have lost all these games, Matt. I mean, they should have lost to Tennessee. They were a nose of the football away from perhaps losing to Auburn. They were down by 9 yesterday. I mean, this has been truly remarkable. And guess what? It's fairly similar to last year when Kirby Smart cobbled a team together. It didn't. It never completely came together. It blew up on them at Ole Miss. It cost them at other times during the season. The Notre Dame game was an abject disaster. But they still won the SEC championship, which is so remarkable. And that is to me what is so interesting about this football program.
Where does Ole Miss look? This era of college football, you can have 2 losses and get in. We've seen it. There's proof. Where is Ole Miss after a loss when they had this game and they played hard and they couldn't find a way to close?
Well, they're in a really difficult spot here because I think my schedule was correct. Early in the morning, I think they go to Oklahoma this week, Matt, and that's a team that was in dire straits yesterday. But somehow South Carolina is making a lot of programs feel better about themselves this year,
which is surprising, by the way.
Incredibly surprising. So I don't know what to make out of that because that was everybody was kind of moving around. I mean, you were watching that game more closely than I was. But to me, it just seems like winning in Norman is going to be problematic for them. Then I'm trying to think in my head. I think their schedule is going to be okay, but they're in an awkward spot. If they drop 2 in a row, they're going to be playing with no more money, house money, the rest of the season.
Okay, speaking of money, house money, and we'll just get into this conversation now. So what does that do for Lane Kiffin with the team that he had last year and a first-round quarterback who's playing well in the NFL, a loaded roster last year, no playoff, another really good team this year, no playoff? What does that do for Lane Kiffin in Oxford with the perception of, can you reach the mountaintop at Ole Miss?
I think it's getting more difficult, and Lane Kiffin has been on the precipice of leaving. Matt, not to revisit ancient history, but he was heading to Auburn a couple of years ago. I mean, that is not in debate. And then his daughter got in the way. That story is confirmed. He was looking at Florida last year. It's a tug of war with him right now because I think he really does love where he is. But
Yes.
Lane Kiffin is a fierce competitor, and he has to wonder, can he do much better than what he did last year? That team was outstanding on both sides of the ball. And this team is good and probably not quite to the degree, but it's not far from it. It's capable. But if let's say they drop this game at Oklahoma, his path to the playoff is going to get difficult. The one thing about that, though, is if Lane Kiffin is not in the playoffs this year, I think there is a higher likelihood that he could leave.
Okay, I need you to settle an in-studio debate that was raging yesterday. Which job, top to bottom, all things considered, one of them's vacant, one of it's not vacant as of this taping at 9 a.m. Eastern. Which job is the better job all around? Resources, winnability, the whole thing. Penn State or Florida? If Florida opens.
Yeah, I think it's pretty close to opening. I like Florida, Matt, and it's not because of the region of the country I'm from. It's just that I have seen the development there. It's not even the recruiting base anymore because that's a misnomer. But I think the commitment there, maybe not dollar for dollar because Penn State is very mighty, but you're just playing in a better area of the country to me.
Right.
And I think it gives you more opportunity. There's not a lot of difference between the two, but I can't help but get hung up in the history of Penn State and all the peaks and valleys.
Yeah.
And Franklin, for all of what has been said about him in the last week, was a top tier coach. He just wasn't at the very first tier. And I think Lane Kiffin, not at Penn State, but Lane Kiffin at Florida is going to would win a national championship.
Yeah, that seems to make more sense. I think that Lane Kiffin at Penn State would be an absolute home run. And I think that's what Penn State needs to do at this point, and their AD Kraft needs to do, because you've got to find a guy that can elevate based on what James Franklin did. And last year that was good enough to get to the playoff and get to the Final Four of the playoff. So how do you build on that? I think Lane Kiffin would be an absolute home run. I know a lot of people were saying Matt Rule, but then Nebraska goes and loses to Minnesota on Friday night. So people were asking me who I think is a home run. And then we got into, I think Lane Kiffin would be a home run. And they're saying, why would he choose Penn State over Florida? Just get to an argument of where you believe the winnability is. But I'm with you. I think that part of the country, playing in the SEC, winnability, I think you could probably win quicker at Ole Miss or at Penn State, because I think there's less to get through in the Big Ten. But he loves it at Ole Miss. We know that. But at some point, you get into a career crossroads of, is this the best that I can do? And he's an aspirational guy, always has been. So that'll be interesting to see as it unfolds. Moving on now. I still don't know why, and I still can't figure it out. But Paul, people had better start saying their name out loud, because Texas A&M is going to be a problem for the rest of the SEC, the rest of the way. They are in a really, really good spot, undefeated, ranked fourth, and clicking on all cylinders.
They are, and it starts with the head coach, Mike Elko. The day he was hired, you kind of felt a sea change in Aggie land, and they continue to negotiate difficult moments. But Matt, everybody's having a hard time on the road this year in the SEC. This is not coming from the conference public relations office. This is watching football as you do every Saturday, all day, and Saturday night. They have a game this weekend that is incredibly intriguing. And I mean, somebody who has always enjoyed my Monday afternoon chats with Brian Kelly, we're getting into the twilight zone right now, coming up this Monday, and who knows how many more Mondays after that. But they're in such a great spot. They keep winning. Now their schedule, you look at their schedule, Matt, and go, okay, well, they've had some big wins, but Notre Dame right now stands out a great deal. But some of the SEC teams, they've been fairly fortunate with their early SEC schedule.
Yeah. And Mike Elko, you hit on it, because they went a complete departure. Jimbo Fisher was the superstar coach. He was the headliner. And Mike Elko was the substantive coach at Duke. And I called a couple of Duke games. So I got to see him as a head coach when he was at Duke. He was, obviously the former Texas A&M defensive coordinator. You know the whole background of the story. But yeah, they did. Texas A&M had, after the Mark Stoops, what would have been they went and hired a name that, in this day and age, you want to win the press conference. And candidly, I don't know that Mike Elko won the press conference, but he was going to win the football games. And he's done that. And now Marcel Reed has developed. They have as good a skill position players of anybody in the country. The defense is going to work itself out. I know, look, Bobby Petrino's offenses and Taylor Green's going to be an NFL quarterback. That's a tough thing to negotiate in and of itself. But, man, A&M, because we're always talking about Alabama, we're talking about Georgia, watch out for Texas A&M, because they have the like you said, they're going to be able to announce themselves sooner or later, was what they did yesterday, in a 2-hour weather delay against Arkansas. All right, let's start getting uncomfortable. That portion of the program. LSU at Vandy. Brian Kelly and the Tigers, they're out of the SEC race and they're out of the playoff race. And it's the temperature in Baton Rouge is probably going to start heating up a little bit.
It will. I heard it throughout the week. There's always been this difficult dance with Brian Kelly and LSU fans. But this past week, it seemed to get even more uncomfortable. And this is not losing to a Vanderbilt team in the past. This was a game that everybody expected Vanderbilt to compete. They were favored, all the things that really don't matter. But it's still hard to sell an LSU fan base on where they are right now. And the Clemson loss, Matt, tell me, we've said this a couple of times with various teams that, like the Alabama loss to FSU keeps getting worse, and the LSU win over Clemson keeps getting worse. So it just doesn't count. And the reason I say that is that LSU is on day one was a team that could have afforded 3 losses. They can't anymore.
Yeah.
So they have to thread a very thin needle. I mean, I'm sure Brian Kelly would not be happy that you ruled him out of the playoffs, but they're working pretty hard on knocking themselves out of the playoffs. If you don't think this weekend might do it, then consider that trip to Tuscaloosa in about 3 weeks.
Yeah, and look, you never know in this day and age of what's capable happening. But I mean, you'd think right now with 2 conference losses at this stage of the season, with what's going on, I mean, that climb, that's a tough hill to climb. And you're right. Look, fine, give them a chance to the end of the season because you got to play the games out and see what happens. But I'd say statistically, LSU's chances of getting in, I mean, they're not good. Joey always looks at me sideways in the studio. I'm like, well, they're probably out of it. And he's like, man, you like eliminating people. I'm like, no, I like kind of looking at the landscape. And right now it doesn't look good for LSU. It has been. It's a weird marriage. I don't know. There's something. I'm just surprised based on, look, the offensive line lost a lot. So we knew the offensive line wasn't going to be great. And we see that with Garrett Nussmeier getting pummeled every week. But, man, the offense, I'm just surprised the offense. And give Vanderbilt credit. They're a great story. Vanderbilt is still in the SEC race and the playoff race. Who thought we'd say that? But it's just something hasn't clicked this year for LSU.
Well, it starts with Nussmeier. And, they tried to paper it with he's okay. But he's been banged up all year. and it makes it difficult at times. I mean, he's capable of making grabs. He was a Heisman favorite in most people's mind with Klubnik, number one pick, and he just has not performed. And even the defense sometimes, Matt, which has really been has carried them. There are moments when they were burned yesterday by Pavia, and that I didn't expect that either.
Yeah, and you hope Clark Lee and his alma mater is ready to stay and build that thing, because with all the jobs are going to be open. But with LSU losing yesterday, week 8, we had 2, 5, 7, 10. That's 4 top 10 upsets. Number 7, Texas Tech goes down to my alma mater, Arizona State. They've resuscitated their Big 12 championship hopes. That was a big upset in the desert. You had the LSU upset. Ole Miss, rankings-wise, an upset, but that was on the road at Georgia, and you know how Georgia plays. And then obviously the shocker on Friday night with Louisville, who's really good, goes in and beats Miami. And every time we want to trust Miami, something like that happens. They're like, well, who knows? And the ACC has flipped on its axis, because now are they a one-bid league because of what Miami did? I do want to get you out of here on this one. I teased it a minute ago. Mike Norvell, Florida State, 4 losses in a row, haven't won an ACC game since last September. They go and lose to Stanford. And in the middle of the night, I watched the end of the game because it was nuts, and I'm still at work and not done yet. But, I mean, where do you see that thing going?
Yeah, I wrestle with Mike Norvell because at the core, I still believe that he's capable of a lot, but you can't argue with those results. I think it's who would have thought after the Alabama after the Alabama win, that Mike Norvell might be on a hot seat than Billy Napier down the street. It's truly remarkable to think about what has happened to him and this program, and there was so much buy-in too, Matt.
Yeah,
I mean they turned it around, and he's ultimately responsible. So yeah, I would think he's on a very slippery slope this morning.
And here's what I absolutely hate for Mike Norvell, because I really like him. He was an OC at Arizona State, got to know him throughout the years. As the future unfolds, it appears to me the 13-0 season was the outlier.
Yeah.
Like that was and I don't like that because of what he was able to do. I'll leave you with this, and I just want your head to spin until we talk next week. With respect to Florida State, what if I told you that Jimbo Fisher doesn't have a coaching job?
Yeah. I think Jimbo Fisher will have a coaching job at the end of the year.
What if I told you that Jimbo, former Florida State coach, is just hanging out doing TV, new AD, new situation, who knows? Who knows if he could go home again?
It was a tough breakup, as you know. But one thing about college football, Matt, none of us have memories. Had Bobby Petrino won these last 2 games, he would be the next Arkansas coach.
Rich Rod's back at West Virginia.
Yeah, Rich Rod was in that was possibly 15 years ago, one of the ugliest divorces maybe in the history of college football. It just doesn't matter because fans care about winning. And the only one that would even be crazier, it's not on the chart right now, with a couple of years from now, Josh Heupel decides he wants to go somewhere else, and Lane Kiffin goes back to Tennessee.
Yeah, there you go. If we start connecting the come-togethers again, I was just thinking about that yesterday. I'm like, well, who had Florida State at a high spot? Oh, well, Jimbo Fisher. What's he doing now? You never know. Look, you never know.
One more thing. Jimbo Fisher and Dan Mullen right now are hotter than they've ever been.
Right? And months ago, they couldn't coach, according to the people.
No.
And here they are. So it is the crazy world of college football. You can just throw one thing out there and it takes off. But what a Saturday it was as we move on to the next week 9 of the season. Wow, I say this every week. For Paul Finebaum, I'm Matt Barrie. Thanks for listening to the Matt Barrie Show presented by Allstate.
You want this, you got that. No way, watch them walk right past you. Run fast while you have